You didn't wake up one day and decide to be this way. Your patience, your temper, your standards, your discipline, they didn't appear out of nowhere. They were installed quietly over years, not by speeches, not by motivational quotes, but by watching how other people handled pressure when no one was impressed. Most people never stop to ask where their behavior came from. They just defend it. They just say, "That's how I am." Marcus Aurelius didn't accept that excuse. He did something uncomfortable instead. He audited his influences. And what he discovered is something most people never want to admit. You are a composite of other people's habits, unless you consciously intervene. Think about the last time you lost your temper, not the dramatic version, the ordinary one. Someone cut you off in traffic. A coworker sent a passive-aggressive message. A family member pushed the same button they always push. And before you could stop it, your body reacted. Jaw tightened, chest heated up. Words came out sharper than you intended. Later, you replayed it in your head. Not because it was catastrophic, but because it was familiar. That reaction felt rehearsed. Here's the uncomfortable truth. It was rehearsed. Not consciously, but repeatedly. Maybe you grew up around someone who exploded under pressure. Maybe you learned that authority meant control, not calm. Maybe you absorbed that sarcasm equals strength, or that anger earns respect. No one sat you down and explained this. You just watched it play out thousands of times, at work, at home, in relationships. And over time, your nervous system filed it away as normal. That's how influence actually works. Not through ideals, but through exposure. Marcus Aurelius understood this early, before he was emperor, before the weight of Rome sat on his shoulders. He didn't talk about success strategies or productivity hacks. He wrote something far more revealing. He listed people, not accomplishments, not goals, people who taught him restraint, who modeled humility, who showed him how to endure pain without becoming bitter, who demonstrated what not to chase. This wasn't nostalgia, it was accountability. He was saying, "This part of me came from there." Now imagine doing that yourself, not as an exercise in blame, but as an exercise in clarity. Where did your impatience come from? Where did your discipline come from, if you have it? Where did your relationship to authority, comfort, or excess originate? Most people never trace the line back, so they never change the source. They just manage the symptoms. They read books about anger while still orbiting people who glorify it. They try to build discipline while drowning in environments that reward indulgence. They talk about calm while feeding themselves constant chaos. And then they wonder why nothing sticks. The problem isn't willpower, it's contamination. You don't rise to your intentions. You default to your training. And training happens whether you consent to it or not. Marcus didn't leave this to chance. He curated his influences like a strategist. Because when pressure comes, and it always does, you don't improvise character. You reveal it. In Book 1 of Meditations, Marcus Aurelius does something unusual. He doesn't lecture. He doesn't moralize. He doesn't instruct the reader at all. He inventories his teachers. From his grandfather, he learned gentleness instead of rage. From his mother, restraint instead of excess. From his guardians, self-reliance instead of entitlement. From philosophers, skepticism towards superstition and empty spectacle. From mentors, discipline without ego. This is not flattery, it's forensic. Marcus is mapping how virtues are transmitted. Here's what he's really saying in modern terms. Character is contagious. Values are absorbed through proximity. You become what you repeatedly observe under stress. Notice what he doesn't praise. He doesn't admire charisma. He doesn't celebrate popularity. He doesn't glorify domination. He repeatedly highlights restraint, steadiness, independence from spectacle, and resistance to excess. Why? Because Marcus lived in a world of constant temptation, political theatre, violence as entertainment, luxury marketed as entitlement, status anxiety everywhere. Sound familiar? Stoicism in practice isn't about suppressing emotion. It's about choosing your conditioning. Marcus understood that philosophy doesn't live in books. It lives in behavior. That's why he was careful about who he listened to, who he admired, who he allowed to shape his instincts. He even warns against being pulled into factional thinking, cheering for teams, tribes, identities that hijack reason. In other words, don't outsource your judgment to crowds. Another key insight here. Marcus praises people who didn't need many things. That's not asceticism for show. That's psychological freedom. When you don't need much, you're harder to manipulate. When you're not desperate for approval, comfort, or stimulation, you're harder to control. And this ties back to influence again. Excess is taught. So is restraint. If you're surrounded by people who constantly seek distraction, outrage, and validation, you will absorb it. If you're around people who endure quietly, work without announcement, and regulate themselves under pressure, you will absorb that too. Marcus wasn't born stoic. He was trained, and he never forgot who trained him. That awareness became armor. The following are 3 practical exercises you can use in your daily life. Exercise 1. The influence audit. What it is. A clear-eyed inventory of who shaped your default reactions. When to use it. When you notice repeating behaviors you don't respect in yourself. Steps. 1. Write down 5 traits you don't like about how you react under pressure. 2. For each trait, ask, where did I first see this modeled? 3. Be specific. A person, a household, a workplace culture. 4. Write 1 sentence. I learned this here. Common mistake. Turning this into blame instead of insight. This is about understanding the source, not attacking it. Exercise 2. Borrow 1 trait. What it is. Deliberate imitation of a single admirable behavior. When to use it. When self-improvement feels vague or overwhelming. Steps. 1. Identify 1 person, real or historical, who handles pressure well. 2. Pick 1 observable trait. Tone of voice, patience, decisiveness. 3. Practice that trait intentionally for 1 week. 4. No speeches, no announcements, just behavior. Common mistake, trying to adopt a whole personality instead of 1 repeatable action. Exercise 3. Environmental subtraction. What it is. Removing influences that quietly reinforce behavior you're trying to outgrow. When to use it. When progress keeps stalling. Steps. 1. Identify 1 input that feeds agitation, excess, or comparison. 2. Remove it for 30 days. 3. Replace it with nothing, or with something quieter. Common mistake, adding more good habits without removing the poison. Marcus Aurelius didn't ask, who am I? He asked, who shaped me? That's the question most people avoid, because once you see the source, you inherit responsibility. Responsibility to stop copying what weakens you. Responsibility to choose better models. Responsibility to train yourself deliberately. Here's the recap. You didn't invent your habits. You absorbed them. Character is trained through exposure, not intention. You can change, but only by changing what you mirror. So ask yourself this. If someone copied your behavior under stress, would you respect what they learned? Because whether you like it or not, someone always is. Calm is power. Character is the only score. If this helped you slow the reaction and see the moment clearly, stay with us. Subscribe for calm, disciplined thinking in a loud world. If someone you know is caught in the storm, share this with them. And before you go, ask yourself, what's one response you'll choose differently today? Calm is power. Character is the only score.